wishing to be done missing, but I guess this comes hand in hand with...
Most people are surprised to hear the thesis until you remind them of things like, in Jesus' time they used to crucify thieves. In medieval times they would have these lethal tournaments. In the history of America, the vice president and the secretary of the treasury challenged each other to a fatal duel. You remind people of these episodes and it seems a little less strange, but I tell the story not just with these anecdotes, but with data showing that that rates of tribal violence representing the world that we evolved in are many times higher than rates of violence today, even with all our wars and genocides. That when you look at statistics on homicide, which date back in Europe to the Middle Ages, you see a decline of about 50-fold. That barbaric practices like crucifixion, like burning heretics at the stake, like dueling, like debtors' prisons, like legalized slavery have been abolished. Took a while, but it happened. And even more recently, there's been a huge decline in the number of wars and the number of deaths in war that most people are not aware of. Why aren't they aware? Well, the rates of violence haven't gone down to zero. There's always enough incidents of bloodshed to fill the evening news. If you get your impressions from the news, you'll think, oh my God, it's more bloody than ever, especially since the news agencies have been getting better at reporting whatever violence does occur. Nowadays, anyone with a cell phone can become an instant reporter and broadcast color footage of violence in action. That affects our subjective impressions. We think the world is getting more violent, but if you actually count the bodies, the world is much less violent. There are fewer wars, there are fewer deaths in war. What went right? I borrowed the title of the book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, from a speech by Abraham Lincoln. And I like that metaphor because it acknowledges that human nature is a complex system. It has many, many parts, many components, many actors, if you want, some of which are our better angels. And what's happened over the course of history is that our better angels have been more and more engaged compared to our, let's say, our inner demons, the parts of human nature that impel us to violence. So this is I try to explain a historical trend with a theory of the human brain, the human mind, human nature, however you want to describe it, which critically says that the mind is not a blank slate, that there's no ghost in the machine pulling the levers, that human nature is complex and has many components, and that history depends on which components are more active. What has happened over the centuries, the millennia, the decades, is that we've built institutions like government, like commercial instruments such as money, such as trade, such as doctrine of human rights, a variety of human creations that basically give our better angels a push and allow them to predominate over the parts of human nature that make us violent, which are still here. We still have violent impulses. We're better and better at inhibiting them. I think there'd be a connection. It's not a strong, tight, or perfect connection because there are still lots of things that can go wrong. There can be some dictator who will do anything to stay in power. If a country has the bad luck of being run by such a dictator, there could be lots of strife. There could be guerrilla movements that are led by fanatical, charismatic leaders. So there's a lot that can go wrong. But on average, it is true that as countries lift themselves out of the worst kind of poverty, their chance of having a civil war goes down. So if through advances in economic development, in technology, in farming techniques, the governments get stronger, they can impose the rule of law, people find work to do instead of joining militias, the commerce that takes place is not controlled by warlords, but by commerce and rules of commerce. all of those things do reduce the rates of violence. And so to the extent that the poorest countries get less poor, their rates of civil war and militia violence should go down. In fact, this is the problem that plagues all attempts to understand war and peace. Namely, there seem to be some parts of the world where everything goes right. You know, Scandinavia. They're rich, they have low rates of violent crime within their borders, they get involved in fewer wars, women have equal rights, they're democratic, they're affluent, they have good health care, they're healthy, they live long, everything goes right. Then there are parts of the world that just suck. Everything goes wrong. People are sick, they're malnourished, they're infested with parasites, they're uneducated, they oppress their women, kids die, they have huge families, many of which don't make it to adulthood, and they fight a lot of wars. So the question is, of all the things, the good things that go together and all the bad things that go together, which one gets it started? Or do societies just randomly kind of get sucked into one attraction zone or another attraction zone? That would be depressing, because we do want there to be some degree of linear causation so that we can do something about it. Otherwise, we could say, well, we can't turn Somalia into Sweden just by hoping that it'll get that way. We do want to do something that will get it started and that maybe will send all of these parameters in the better direction. Well, there probably is, and the part that would be justified is we want to simplify as much as the world will allow. And we know that countries can get better in many ways at once, because many countries have, that were 30 or 40 years ago, for example, South Korea was a mess. Now it is, almost like Sweden. A lot of things are going right. It used to be that lots of things were going wrong. So we know that something can change, and it's not unreasonable to try to figure out what was not that there's a chain of dominoes, but still something must have happened that set it on the right path. And it's an empirical question whether we can identify them.
And whether it's a few set of factors or whether, they're many interacting in complex ways.
That's right. And they do interact in complex ways, which is not to say that there may be one that's more important than all the others.
Exactly. Yeah.
Keep on wishing to be done missing, but I guess this comes hand in hand with wanting it all. I need sleep, killed all the sheep.